Good evening. So, hello everybody. So, I forgot my glasses. They're in the car. So, if I'm doing that, that's so that I can read it. Okay, so good evening. I'm Councillor Joe Hickson, the Chairman of Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services Policy Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this is happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated, and the members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So, moving on to item 1. Are there any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Cooch.
Okay, thank you. So, item 2. Are there any substitute members?
Councillor Millam substituting for Councillor Cooch.
Thank you. So, item 3, urgent items. So this has come through today. There is an urgent item, isn't there?
Oh, no, there are no urgent items, but I've just given you this for the cross-cutting. So it's not an urgent item, but it's just the cross-cutting for the item 10.
Okay, all right. So there's just an amendment. We've got the cross-cutting. You've got a supplementary piece of paper to the papers that you've received because this was missing from the original report. Okay. There are no urgent items then, but that cross-cutting section for item 10 and medium-term financial strategy 2025-26 to 2029-30, they've been updated and circulated to members today. Item 4, are there any visiting members? No. Okay, item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? Nope. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? Nope. Item 7, so we're going to consider whether or not the items are taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. So I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9, the minutes from the previous meeting. So are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes?
Can I just come in, Chair?
Yeah.
Oh, good evening, members. I just wanted to make a quick clarification on the minutes. If you turn to page 2 of the minutes regarding item 50, housing benefits, war pensions policy. On the last sentence, you'll see the figure 27,266. That is incorrect. It should be roughly 6,524, as it just doesn't include the 75% subsidy given by the government.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. So with that amendment, is it agreed that they're a correct record and signed? Okay, thank you very much. Item 9. Are there any comments on the forward plan, or do any of the cabinet members that are at this meeting wish to make any comments? No, so I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Item 10. This is going to be introduced by Councillor English, the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Enforcement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members. This area of work covers a number of portfolios. This evening we're only really looking at parking, although the recommendation does refer to the supplementary planning guidance being prepared. Contrary to the assertion in the introduction, some of this work was already happening before the motion to full council, but that motion was nevertheless useful in helping to raise some other issues that may not have been considered earlier on. Tonight we're looking essentially at the recommendation to review the operation of the residents' parking permit scheme in Fant. Now, I have to say, this could potentially have some benefits, but there are potentially disbenefits for this. So I would not want us to rush into this. It needs careful consideration, and there's some aspects that have not been considered in the report, which would also potentially be available when we are looking at reviewing the parking permit scheme in that area. Whilst I'm not at this stage necessarily advocating it, further actions that could take place include looking at the permitted waiting times in particular streets. I'm not sure that there is a significant contribution from commuter parking, but if there is, it should be possible by variation of waiting times to actually remove that element from the on-street parking considerations in that part of the town. In my own ward of High Street, and also in the Old East Ward, now part of Pennington Heath Ward, there was a contribution from commuter parking, which was addressed by reducing the waiting time for non-residents in some roads from 2 hours to 1 hour, and in the most congested and stressed roads, which are around Marsham Street, to half an hour. We can't really go below that because this is a devolved function from the county council, and the county council would not, we have tested this in the past, go lower than that. I'm not saying that there is a significant commuter element to this, but if there was, that would be one way of addressing that particular element and ensuring that the only people parking on the streets in those areas are either delivering to properties or are actually residents of those or visitors to those properties. That could be picked up as part of the review. Now, in terms of the main thrust of the review, which is about numbers and types of permits, as I said, there are potential benefits, but this is quite a thorny issue and will have to be developed in collaboration with local ward members so that we do not make a situation actually worse for residents. So we will proceed with due caution on deliberation on that so that we do not have inadvertent consequences. The law of unintended consequences is something that you often see in local authorities. More broadly, the supplementary planning guidance and other measures that are being taken will be going to other packs over the next few weeks, and hopefully will be proceeding quite speedily, as we need to get that work done before we get too engrossed in county council elections and run into difficulties on public consultation. I'm sure that there will be questions and comments, and I'm quite happy to come back.
Oops. Thank you. Are there any comments or suggestions from any member of the committee at this point? Okay. Councillor Millen?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment as someone that lives in this ward, just so that people are aware. The 3 parking zones that you have cover such a tiny, tiny area of Fanton Oakwood that if you reduce the amount of permits in that area, you're just going to push the people's cars to the places which don't have permits. And those people are already pissed off enough as it is that people with permits are already parking there because there is no room. We already have cars parked over pavements, parked across people's driveways. It's a constant issue. Reducing the permits is not going to help. It's just going to push the problem to other areas. So it feels like it may look like a solution on the outside, but it's absolutely not at all.
Thank you. Councillor Forecast?
Thank you, Chairman. Kimmy, could you let us know where this is in a second, please? Because I don't recognise those zones. And Councillor English, is it not more appropriate, and can this committee, is it in this committee's remit that every HMO in Fanton Oakwood has to provide 1 car parking space per person, and if not, it's refused. Is that not possible?
If I can, as I said, we were focusing on the parking issue this evening. And I say I have no vested interest in this. It was proposed that this review take place, but I have not presupposed the outcome of the review, and I've suggested one or two additional things that we could look at that might actually help. In terms of the HMO policy, in the supplementary planning guidance, that is part of the thrust of the document, that we have adequate parking for HMOs, but that is basically being considered by committee tomorrow under the supplementary planning document. So you're quite right, Councillor Forecast, but we've split it up into different portfolio remits to go to different committees, so that we don't sort of try and discuss two things at once.
Thank you. Councillor Gooch?
Thank you, Chairman. When I first read this, I thought it was very clearly set out. So I'd like to thank the report author, because it was just plain and straightforward. But from what I've just heard, it really is more complicated than that. But I do think that we've got to start somewhere, and I think the recommendation, for us to go out to consultation, it starts us somewhere. But I would like reassurance that although it's going to different packs, that it is considered in its entirety, so that there's nothing missed. And what I particularly like is that, and it is particularly important, that the ward councillors are closely involved. I know you're looking for evidence. Evidence is so necessary, I get that. And I know that you're saying, oh, a lot of it's based on hearsay, but let's get the evidence. Let's listen to the ward councillors. So I'll probably be going with a recommendation on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
William?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just on Councillor Gooch's point, this report and the one tomorrow evening on the SPD itself are both going to overview and scrutiny next week, so there will be that sort of overarching of the issue, looking at it all in the round, as you felt would be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Just to answer your question, Stan, I don't remember which zones are which, 1, 2 and 4, but they basically cover Warwick Square, Bower Lane, Bower Mount Close, Warwick, I think, Bower Place, Florence, Douglas, Charles, Reginald, Lower Fant, Upper Fant, St Michael's Road. And Upper Fant is only part of the way up to Upper Fant. I think you get a bit past Clare Park and there's no more permits. All of those, no permits.
I mean, the potential problem, and when this has been looked at before, is the impact would potentially fall disproportionately on Milton Street and the side roads of Milton Street in particular, and perhaps a few other roads going up towards Western Road, Hartnham Street and so on. So we have to be very, very careful when we're doing this, that we actually bring forward proposals that will help rather than make the situation either worse or just move it, which is the more common outcome. So I reiterate, we have no preferred outcome. We just think this is worth looking at, and to see whether we can shake loose some productive gains. But if it turns out we can't, then that will be that.
Thank you, Clive. Is there a reason that past Upper Fant Road, Pope, Dover Street wasn't included? Kim, you might know more, but it's just as bad there, if not worse. Yeah.
I can tell you that, Councillor Forecast, back when John Frisbee was a county member, which you may or may not remember, it was a while ago. I mean, you may have been quite young at the time. We did consult the residents of Milton Street and various side roads on whether they wanted residents parking, and the answer on 3 occasions, I believe, up to now, has been no. So it's not that they haven't been asked, but the response has been generally no. That they do not wish to have that. I think the issue is essentially that even now parking there is quite difficult, and I suspect residents are not particularly keen on paying for a parking permit and then not being able to have a space. So there was fears that they would be paying for nothing.
Okay, so Councillor Sweetman.
Just with that, also with Upper Fant, they have the added problem with the school's not a problem, but with Bower Grove, the taxis collecting the young people from school, so there's a lot of congestion and parking, and yeah, so that's on top of that lot really.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Councillor Moore.
just to add, like, this is even recently because we've been trying to set up a residents association for Rosehome, which is just one road in Fant, and they hate the parking because people come from all around, all the adjacent roads to park in Rosehome because there's no yellow lines there. They have trades vehicles parked there, they have their neighbours, they have all sorts of problems with parking down there. And at the recent Residents Association meeting, we were talking about options, and they were like, we don't want to pay for a permit, but we want to stop everyone else from parking on our road. And that is true for every resident. They don't want people parking on their road. They want their road to be for them. And when you say, well, if you get on the permit, you'll probably be sharing with Lower Fant Road, and they're like, well, they're already parking here. And you get it, it's very tribalist with each road. They don't want the other roads parking on there. They don't, the residents are dead against permits, and yeah, they.
So, thank you, Chairman. Forgive me, Kimmy. Is it almost that a review on these particular areas is redundant? It's just a waste of time. Maybe a review of the whole ward is better.
Just in my opinion, I think you could go to the you can go to the residents, but I've spoken to them recently, and the opinion that I'm getting from the ones that I'm speaking to is they don't want to pay for a permit unless they get a guaranteed space, and we can't guarantee a space. We counted the amount of parking spaces in our area, which is why I roughly know where all the parking zones are, because we counted how many spaces there were to try and gauge how many permits were being given per space. And lots of residents, they're using the words, it's a stealth tax, it's, I think with this particular issue, to try and not go off topic, the permits isn't the issue. What you said earlier about HMOs should be obligated to provide a parking space for their residents, that would stop them going in these tiny terraced houses which don't have any parking spaces, which is then pushing more and more cars onto the pavement, and the pavements don't have yellow or double yellow lines on, so they can't even be prosecuted for parking on the pavements, and then kids and families and disabled people are being pushed out onto the roads. So we need to tackle not providing car parking spaces. I think the permit thing's a lost cause, unfortunately.
So on that point, and Clive, I know you said it's sort of tomorrow's committee, but on point 2 of the recommendations, can we not have, so it says to pursue the adoption of a supplementary planning document for housing and multiple occupancy, can we not add a line that says that advocates that HMOs have to provide at least one car parking space per one tenant?
Okay, Clive.
It's perfectly reasonable for the committee to stress that the inclusion of that point is important. It is already in there, but if you want to reiterate as a committee tonight the key importance of that, then by all means you can do that.
Well, I would like to
So
make that.
it is going out to consultation, so that could be part of the consultation, but if you want to make a motion and it's seconded, then we can vote on it. Okay, thank you. So, okay, Councillor Callan seconds that motion. So, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Forecast, I got most of that wording, but can I just get clarity on what you're exactly moving? So that was advocates that one carpooling space for one tenant per property, per HMO. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a proposal and I have a seconder. So votes in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. So we are asked to, are there any more comments or suggestions before I go to the decisions on page 11?
Just done that.
Okay, cool. So, item number 11, third quarter risk update. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Cox, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services.
Thank you. So we're looking at the third quarter risk update. I'd like to thank Uchi Oyufumi, for Uchi to me, both for your tenacity and also for your enthusiasm for risk management. It's like when you mention it in a room full of people, loads of people suddenly start looking at their feet. But it's really important that we do have a sort of comprehensive risk management program, especially when we're in times of change. So never a better time to look at this. So previously, the quarterly risk update was reported as part of the financial update. For the reasons I've just mentioned, we felt it was important to ensure that risk and risk management had due consideration. And so from now, it's going to be reported as a separate agenda item. So welcome to the agenda, Uchi. The Council's risk management system, JCAD or JCAD, captures risks at both the corporate and operational level. This report focuses on corporate risks. Operational risks are dealt with more in with officers. The risks have been discussed and reviewed with relevant risk owners amongst officers, and in order that risks relating to the new corporate strategy are properly identified and to allow a comprehensive review, the wider leadership team and the Cabinet will take part in a risk workshop on May the 7th, which we're looking forward to. And the outcomes of that will be reflected in the next report to this committee for quarter 4. Report highlights. So new corporate risks, you can see the summary on page 30 of the agenda pack, have been identified since the previous quarter in relation to generative artificial intelligence. It's coming at us at pace and we need to understand its effect and particularly where the data that it's capturing goes. What's described as the failure of Maidstone House building, but before anybody gets alarmed, that's actually a watching brief, not an emergency. So we've got a building that we know will need some sort of parts replaced, and we had a plan for its decarbonisation. It's just right that we keep an eye on it as one of our largest assets. And then one that we hear a lot about, local government reform and devolution. So hardly a day goes past without us talking about it. The risk reduced effectiveness pardon me, of relationships with strategic partners is considered to have increased, again due to local government reorganisation and devolution. The risks around diminishing town centre vitality and rising construction costs and risk of contractor insolvency, probably again a reference to Maidstone House decarb, have been downgraded. And then 2 risks have been closed, always a good thing. Implication of the Elections Act 2022 in terms of voter ID, postal votes and overseas voters, which you'll remember was an issue. And then the Suez waste contract not performing to expectations, that's also been closed. In terms of recommendations, you're asked to note the risk update and any questions, and I ask if Uchi would like to address them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, so Councillor Millam first.
Okay, I can't take credit for this because this is Grace's words. It was very last minute that she couldn't come, so she's forwarded me all of her notes. So I'm just going to read it as she had it. She's got here environmental damage risk on page 10 of the appendix, that there's very little mention of the impact of heat, but lots about flooding. And flooding is, of course, important. And Grace has put here, you know, her home was badly flooded in 2013, but there were 3,000 excess heat deaths in 2022 compared to 3 deaths from flooding. So it needs to be given more attention. And 172 deaths in Kent in that summer. And then the other point that she's put here is the cost of living crisis risk. One of the main causes of the cost of living is cost of gas, and there's no mention of encouraging energy efficiency in this section at all. Residents should be encouraged to improve their homes now ahead of the next winter. For example, draft excluders, radiator panels, boiler covers, and other major projects if residents can afford it. And she's put here that she thinks there was an online campaign around pension credit and winter fuel allowance, but this isn't mentioned anywhere in the risk assessment.
Uchi, are there any that you want to address? If I can make a couple of comments after you if you want to. Okay, I'll go first quickly. So I think at my level, excess heat death sounds like a really good observation that we should capture that. I imagine Uchi's one step ahead, so just sort of reserve that. Also, in terms of the cost of living risk, and particularly the cost of gas, so I think part of that is going to be a cross-cutting issue into some of the programme that we've got around climate change, or actually climate adaptation and mitigation. So we'll hold that thought, but also I'll pass over to Uchi because I imagine she's already on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. You're absolutely right about the cross-cutting measures, and definitely noted on putting a bit more information around the heat damage and not just reflecting flooding. So that's noted, and we will include that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Conyard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very, very tiny one. Page 39 under planned actions, last sentence. You might want to adjust the final sentence unless the cyber exercise was far more enjoyable than ones I've ever carried out.
Thank you.
Noted.
Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? No? Okay. So we're asked to note Appendix 1 that's attached. So is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 12. This is the third quarter financial update report. Yep. And this is also going to be introduced by Councillor Cox, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services.
Thank you. It's just one of those committees, right, where everything's around finance, so I apologise now for how much you'll listen to me. I'll make it quick. So, third quarter financial update. This sets out the financial position for the third quarter of the 24-25 budget. So that's one that ended in March this year. The position for the council as a whole is that projected revenue overspend for the year has dropped from 449,000 to 49,000. So I think that's a brilliant outcome. I'll talk a little bit more about how that was achieved in a second. But I wanted to thank Mark and his team and all of the wider leadership team and the officers for their diligence and agility for spotting ways in which that those ends could be tightened, or the belts could be tightened within reason. I'm just trying to read my writing here, actually. Yeah, and I think the other thing I wanted to mention was it's also true that in the first quarter of any new budget, when we report on that, that's when you're going to get your greatest variance, because you've not had enough time to look at any changes. But over the course of the next quarter and the next quarter, and hopefully by the time you get to the fourth one, you've had plenty of time to adjust to whatever the prevailing circumstances are. So, but again, thanks to the team to making that happen. Report highlights the revenue budget. The services covered by this pack are projecting an underspend for the year of 1.609 million, and the details are on page 63. Overall, the council is projecting an overspend, as I mentioned, of 49,000, down from the 449,000 reported in the previous quarter. As in previous quarters, the net position reflects both, there are some overspends and some underspends, and they counter each other out. The areas most of overspend and underspend remain broadly the same as previously reported, but improved or less adverse outcomes. For example, I've actually categorized these of there's three different times where we were over pessimistic, over optimistic, and then actually where we were just, in fortune was in our favor. So the fortune in our favour one is interest and investment income, where we have a positive or favourable variance of 1.3 million, and that arises from the slippage in the capital programme and continuing high interest rates, so more in the bank, earning more interest. And so that was up from 1.15 million reported in quarter two. Household waste and recycling, as this is the new contract and everything associated with that, we've got a favourable variance again of 616,000, up from 500,000 reported in quarter two. So hats off to the team. I know there were challenges with the new waste contract, but to have brought it in and to the position of stability now with that result, I think is commendable. The third one, development management, advice and application fees, which we know have not been as high as had been projected, and many reasons why. So we've got a 624,000 adverse variance, but that again is reduced from 781,000 reported in quarter two, so well done to the teams there. Capital budget, £20 million of the capital budget for the year is projected to slip into the 25-26 financial year. You can see that on page 68. In retrospect, the capital budget was over-optimistic given the delays in particular in obtaining planning permission for the Maidstone East development, so that's just taking longer than anticipated, but worth it to get it right. Reserves, the covering report sets out the Council's reserves position on page 55, from which it can be seen that a healthy but not excessive level of reserves continues to be maintained. And just remain mindful, obviously, of the uncertain times currently, and we just got to sort of keep our eyes on that one. The report also covers treasury management, where it's stated it can be seen that the council benefited from healthy cash balances, which were £33 million at the end of the period. Two other areas to just draw attention to. So one is community larders. A one-off sum of 139,000 for community larders was included in the 24-25 budget. And details of future plans for community larders utilising this funding were set out in a report to Cabinet in December 24. We've agreed to expand to 2 additional location sites within the scheme, and that means the cost will exceed the original allocation. And while there's funding available to cover the extra cost, in the interest of transparency, you're asked to formally approve the additional amount of £50,594 for those 2 additional site coverage. And finally, outstanding rent write-off, so a byproduct of uncertain times, particularly in sort of commercial sector. Appendix 2, page 78, contains details of business rates debts that it's recommended to be written off. All possible steps have been taken to recover the debts, and they're now considered to be irrecoverable. And I've quizzed Mark on those. I think I know a little bit about it, so I've been asking, have you done this? Have you tried that? And he's satisfied me at least that, yes, every step's been looked at. So recommendations, you're recommended to ask Cabinet to note the contents of the report, to approve the additional spend on community larders, and to approve the debt write-offs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. Very well set out and absolutely well done to officers. I think I say that most years, but it's true. I've just got one nagging little doubt about community larders and its something that somebody said to me only the other day about community larders, probably linked to food banks, but their remark was, well, all it does is to give money to people so that they've got more money in their pocket to go and spend on drugs. Have we got any kind of evidence or data or knowledge to prove or demonstrate that that might be true? Or is it just being just a nasty comment?
I'm going to ask Anna to answer because Anna's been all over the detail of the Community Lanterns project, and yeah, I think it's the best way. There you go.
I'll be frank, I find it an uncomfortable statement. Yeah, I'm not sure who said that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm extremely uncomfortable with the prospect of us ever being in a situation where we are assessing whether somebody is using their money to purchase drugs or anything else um, rather than food, for a number of reasons. One, I think it suggests an opinion of people who are having to use those facilities, and I don't know that that's something that we want to get into from an equality, diversity and inclusion perspective. And secondly, I think when people are addicted to substances, the relationship with the substances are often very complicated, and they may need to make decisions based upon their survival. And the first thing that we should be looking to do is to support people into proper facilities or programs to support them with that, not withdrawing food. I appreciate off the cuff, that is my probably semi-personal opinion, but I think it's rooted in some fact and knowledge.
Chairman, I find that really helpful. I really do. Thank you very much indeed for that, and I might pass it on.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, so on page 49, we have 4 recommendations. So I'm going to take them as a block to save a bit of time. So, so the recommendations on page 49, are those agreed? Thank you very much. So 13. Yes. Item 13. So this is the reopening of the council's housing revenue account. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Cox, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services. That's a nasty cough there, Councillor Summers again.
It's all of Cabinet were together last week and we've all got it, so it's what it is. Need a bigger room. So thank you for letting me talk to this paper. We also have John Littlemore here and William Cornell, depending on how much detail you want to go into. So I wanted to start by thanking John, William, Mark and all of the team for working on this issue. Obviously it's progressive, as we're looking to build our housing stock and looking to safeguard that in the best way we can. So this council has embarked on an ambitious council house building programme with an initial target to own and manage at least 1,000 affordable homes. The council did previously have housing stock, but that was transferred to Golding Homes around 20 years ago. And when the council had that housing stock, it was held in a housing revenue account, HRA, which was subsequently closed. We didn't need it once we transferred the housing. The purpose pardon me, of a HRA is to ensure that affordable housing assets are accounted for separately from the council's other activities, so that housing rent cannot be utilised to fund other services. And it also protects other general monies too. So effectively it's ring-fenced, and it means that it doesn't get commingled and it can be measured for and accounted for separately, which is the right thing to do. Councils today are legally required to open a housing revenue account once they get to 200 affordable homes in ownership, or an alternative. It doesn't have to be a HRA account. And so it's right that we do plan accordingly. A little bit hot off the press, a consultation has just been launched whether or not 200 is the right number, whether it should be 200 or 500, etc. But we've had a very quick discussion on it. And we can't change our plans just because of a potential consultation. It's like many things at the moment, we have to deal with what's in front of us. So this paper is here today for that reason. Realistically, the operating environment of a HRA account is not ideal for councils to encourage them to invest in affordable housing stock, as it must be let on secure tenancies which are subject to the right to buy. And obviously houses that we're putting into an affordable home scheme, we want to make sure that they're there for not just the first generation of occupants, but the second and the third, etc. If we do hold our stock in a HRA, it would be subject to the right to buy, but the promising insight is that the current government appears to be on a course of watering down the right to buy incentives just for this reason, so that it's likely the risk of that sort of turnover of affordable housing is reducing. They're very much aligned with our thinking on that. The report does explore alternatives to the housing revenue account approach, but the officer view is that none of these are compelling, and we've grilled officers a little bit on that as well for all the right reasons, in so much as those alternatives introduce other issues or more risks than they would actually solve. The report gives flexibility to Mark as our Director of Finance in consultation with myself as to when the HRA would be opened or should be opened, to take into account when exactly the council will approach the 200 homes threshold. And that's my wrap up, and obviously we'd be pleased to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? No? Okay, so the recommendations are on page 79 to 80. And as I did with the previous items, the 4 recommendations, we'll take them together. So are those recommendations agreed?
Sorry, Chairman, can we just record our thanks to the officer? I thought this was a really comprehensive and clear report, because I couldn't get my head around it, but I read this and I thought, actually, this makes sense. Sorry, I should have said so before, but I'd just like to record our thanks to the officers for the report.
Okay, thank you. Can you note that? Thank you. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. The next item, item 14. So the new draft key performance indicators. This is going to be introduced again by Councillor Cox, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services.
I apologise now. The good news is this is the last one I'm going to talk to. So, okay, so we've got new draft KPIs, key performance indicators for 25-26. This policy advisory committee includes performance monitoring within its remit, which is why we're bringing it here. The report sets out the draft list of KPIs for the 25-26 year. These have been reviewed and are presently under each priority area of the new corporate strategy. So each one of them has an owner underneath the corporate strategy. KPIs ensure that we transparently monitor and oversee the council's progress against its priority areas. It's worth mentioning underneath KPIs there are also loads of performance indicators that are managed by respective service leads. So this isn't the complete list, it's just the ones that we will look at in this forum. Performance indicators will continue to be updated and published on the Council's KPI dashboard, which is accessed via the website, and complemented with a half-yearly and annual report on the performance position. Contents of the report. 20 KPIs are proposed for this pack. The majority, 13 of them, fall under the corporate priority of a high-quality place adapted for climate change. 2 are under a fairer economy for people and planet, and the remaining 5 fall under the category of how we do things. The appendix details which portfolio each KPI sits under, as well as other details around frequency of reporting and whether the indicator will have a target or it's to be provided for context or information only. Of the 20 that are proposed, 9 are new key performance indicators and 11 have previously been reported to committees as in the last year. So you are recommended to propose the new set of KPIs for 25-26 to Cabinet, including any additional indicators suggested by this committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that when we had our chairman's briefing, there was some discussion about whether or not officers were completely happy with the amount of KPIs that there are there. So it'd be interesting to get some feedback on that from officers.
I am going to hand over to Anna, but I forgot to say thank you to Anna and also to Carly for a lot of work that's been going on these.
How unfair. Thank you. So the number of proposed doesn't differ that much from previous years. As an authority, we have, over a period of time, tried to shrink the number down, but the number has grown again over a period of time because additionals have been added in by committee. I think from an officer perspective, it's desirable to have less indicators because it requires more monitoring, but I think from my perspective that as a committee you should see the indicators that you want to see and they should satisfy you being able to have proper oversight of the services within your remit of this committee, but with the addition that we can always bring you information, you can always request information throughout the year. And then the final point obviously is we've moved to a dashboard system with the idea that that makes data more transparent for the public so that they are able to see that information more clearly on the website and interact with it more. So for that reason as well, we have tried to make a good amount of data available to show the breadth of this committee's area. But it really is up to you what you feel you need to be able to see to sufficiently monitor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee members? Councillor Conrad.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question. When I was using the dashboard, I noticed that all but one of the footfall KPIs were quarterly. Is it easily possible to have the other ones shifted into monthly as well? If we don't have that data, then don't worry about it.
It very much depends on the indicator. For the most part, where they're in our control, we do have obviously more opportunity to monitor things monthly, but not always. There are a number of indicators that were outside of our control and we just have to rely on when we're able to get that data. If you had an idea about which ones, then we can look into it for you.
I was specifically looking at town centre footfall.
Sorry, did you say that? I missed it. I would need to go and check to see whether we can pull that in or not. Sorry.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be particularly interested to see what happens over the coming months, quarters. The percentage of fly tips cleared or assessed should be cleared or assessed within 4 working days. I have to say that my experience so far over the past years, fly tipping, certainly in Barming Woods, is almost next day, within 24 hours. And if it isn't, there's always a reason, a specific reason why it isn't cleared. And I would really hope that we see over the coming months, with the pressures on our budgets, I know we're going to be affected one way or another, but I'm just wondering how long we can maintain that fantastic service for. People really appreciate it because fly tipping upsets everybody. And I think so far the borough has been very proud of its track record. So Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. And I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I also just wanted to mention, I'm always sort of blown away by the amount of community involvement in dealing with, it's probably on the greater side of litter than it is on sort of like, you know, a typical fly tipping. But the number of people who will just sort of don their yellow vests and go out at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning to pick up other people's McDonald wrappers and, you know, some appalling stuff you get, just because they like to see it tidy. And the waste management team have done a lot, particularly, you know, Carl have done a lot to actually recognise that community engagement, and long may that continue. I think it's really valuable. Thank you.
Yes, here. Councillor Jones.
I'd just like to echo that comment. Carl McIver, I work very, very closely with him. The litter picking, the hoops, the litter pickers, the green bags he's always dropping off at me. And I work with Lordswood and Walderslade have a huge litter picking group that they almost go out daily. They've got their own dedicated Facebook page, and they monitor it, you know, how many bags, and I mean, it's that they're all over it. Sandling are out regularly, at least once a month, and myself and Councillor Thompson often are there first Saturday in the month. Boxley Village have got their own Breadhurst. So, and it is with the support of the waste team, because the equipment that comes forward to support these events, you know, it's really appreciated, and yeah, just another vote of thanks, really.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so the recommendation on page 89 is to agree the draft indicators as in Appendix A. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. So, on to item 15. Yeah, 15? Yeah, 15. This is allocation of land for biodiversity net gain. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Summersgill, the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery.
Thank you, Chair. This was a topic that first came to PAC in July last year, so I apologise for the time it's taken to get anything further, and this is really effectively just another update and where we're going with it. I believe biodiversity net gain has become a bit more familiar to people since in last July, but the government now seems to be introducing a new idea that developers can pay into nature funds instead of doing BNG, and we wait to see how that affects the market as well. So we are still in a rather dubious state of market at the moment. So the last time in July, I sought to bring forward two sites that were wooded sites, numbers 1 and 2 on this list in here, and it was suggested that I could gain more by assessing the council land portfolio for other sites, and also that ward members and parish councils representing those proposed sites had not been consulted on the recommendations. So I was sent away to do that. So with the new biodiversity and climate change manager who came in November, we've been looking at 7 sites now rather than the original 2, and we discounted the first 2 because they're quite biodiverse already, and the local parishes would like to keep them as they are, as woods that they can use. So we looked at all the other 6 of the 7 sites. We've just been given a 7th site to look at, and we have considered that 2 of the sites are potentially suitable for biodiversity net gain off-site facilities, and 2 others are not due to their size and also to an imminent planning consent for a woodland burial site on one of them. There is a map on page 103 showing where the 7 sites are, and we at this phase, just as we did with the first 2 sites, we would like to carry out a feasibility survey as to whether they would be suitable for biodiversity net gain and the quantum that may be associated with those sites. So the two sites that we wish to bring forward are one in Yolding, in my own ward, which is a fallow site, which could suffer from flooding, so we have to investigate that. And the other one is a site in Sandling, which has got very good biodiversity, but all of a sudden KCC may want to put the A249 extension through it. So again, we're in a little bit of a bind as to what to do. But the first stage we wish to do is have these feasibility studies undertaken on the sites at a cost of £4,173, which is already in our existing budget. And I will come back to you with further advice on that after we've had those studies done, and also when we've evaluated site 7, which is Fulling Pits Wood in the Vinters area.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Ooh, snap. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. This is really a lovely report to read, isn't it? I felt very positive and full of the joys of spring, looking at the daffodils, and I thought, oh, this is the Borough Council actually doing something for nature, to restore nature. This is our climate change, our changing climate actions and biodiversity stuff. It's actually happening. We're doing something. So I was really encouraged by this report, and I fully support it. It's great to see. I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask, and if it isn't, I respect that. But with where the site is not suitable, have you got any ideas as to what you would do with it? I'm thinking of site 6. Would it just be disposed of, or what?
No, site 6, which is in your ward, yes. We and both of you. Oh no, it was a former allotment, and it's landlocked, and it's too small for BNG. But I am trying to get Parks first to do what they should have been doing in clearing it, and then we want to develop that further by seeing what can be done, perhaps as a community involvement in the site, because it does lend itself to a community orchard or a small community development. But I have to talk
Even
to
though
the
it's
parish
landlocked.
councils.
Sorry.
Councillor Conant.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to turn this question on its head a little bit to see if we could use this for not necessarily what it's supposed to be, specifically to Site 2, which is 4 Oakwood. Looking at the site, it's a lovely piece of woodland, and thoroughly agree with the assessment. There's a high baseline in biodiversity already in the area. However, it is not protected by many NPPF framework protections, so there's precious few, if any, statutory protections on there. It's not in the flooding zone. It is in the landscape of local value for the low weald, but that is about the only protections that it does get. With one eye on the future, that this body may not be around in the next sort of 4 or 5 years, would it be a suitable site to basically get 30 years of extra protection on this site while something else can be put in place?
Just checking, that was site 4 Oakswood. Yeah. Yes, I've been heavily involved with Sutton Valence Parish Council, who have an environment group, and asked them what they would like to do with it at the site. They particularly wish to leave it as it is. It's so remote, there is no vehicular access, there are ditches around it, and they believe that it's a facility that's best left alone, and I'm respecting the parish's view on that. I did push them to try and think about doing something more with it. In fact, last week when we had another meeting, but it's so remote, they feel that it's best left as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
May I come back,
Oh,
please?
sorry. Yeah,
Thank you.
Councillor Connor.
I fully agree with the parish's sentiment on that. And yes, it's a lovely piece of woodland. I've ridden past it many times in my youth. I'm glad that it has been left alone for such point. My reason for raising it is that it will be it will be out of the parish's control as to whether that's left alone to a large degree, and out of our control once any governmental changes are taking place. Thus, asking for its consideration to get the additional protections in place with a statutory instrument while we can.
Yes, I'll note that, along with other things from MPC ownership that may pass to parishes, like toilets. I'm thinking of trying to get hold of modern car park toilets for ourselves.
Okay, now Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo the remarks made by Councillor Conyard in respect of the land at Sandling. If there's any further protection that we can offer to this piece of land, as you've just mentioned, the A229 widening, it's causing a huge amount of concern to Sandling residents. We've had, myself and Councillor Thompson have had several residents meetings. We've got another one on Saturday. There's, talk of CPOs. There's lots of residents are really, really concerned, losing 8 to 10 metres of their gardens. I mean, it's so anything more that we can do around this piece of land, while it is still within our power to do so, I think would be appreciated.
Yes, and as you may or may not know, Councillor Harwood has actually visited the site in previous years, and he has a good understanding of the biodiversity there already. So he's also coming at me from the other side to get this organised as soon as possible, because the more we know about it, the more we can aim for some sort of protection or local nature reserve.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? So the proposal that we've got here is for sites 3 and 5, and that's on page 98. Yeah, okay. So we're asked that the two sites 3 and 5, identified as potentially suited to off-site biodiversity net gain, warrant further investigation by instructing feasibility studies for each. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. So item number 16. Biodiversity and climate change strategies update. This is again going to be introduced by Councillor Summersgill, Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to congratulate Shelley here on the work she's done on this in the 2 or 3 months since she's been here. It's quite intensive. We adopted the original Biodiversity Climate Change Action Plan in 2020, and when I came into Cabinet, I thought it was a sensible time halfway through the 10 years of validity of that to review it and try and set some more details for the second 5 years, especially as I noted everything was mostly to be done by 2030. I wish to see more things that are targeted annually if possible. In reviewing the original strategy, we're looking at the action plan, but we also reviewed the findings of our residents' climate survey back in late 2023 and their priorities, and feedback from the Council's most recent climate action scorecard grading, we are looked at by a third party every year who mark our document and tell us how good we are or not. And we also looked at some of the higher performing councils and their results from climate action scorecards. We we decided that we would split the document into a strategy, lead strategy with information, and an action plan as a separate document. The action plan for this will be coming forward in June, so there's little detail apart from, I can tell you it has 9 columns of various detail. But in discussion with the informal cabinet and the senior management, it was also decided to split the original strategy into 2 strategies, one based on biodiversity and one on climate change. And this was easier to then consider which departments and which parts of the council were dealing with those particular areas. There was a lot of cross correlation before, so we think we've made it simpler to define who's dealing with which areas. So in the biodiversity, the key priorities are nature recovery and climate resilience, and each of those has 4 areas of focus. These are on page 113. And under the climate change strategy, the key priorities are decarbonisation and local sustainability. And they have 5 areas of focus and 4 respectively. These will, as I say, the action plan will, the strategy I'm provided to you, if we look in, let's say, page 152, say that one, on local sustainability, the key priorities and the key focus areas form the first 2 columns, and then we've specified key action areas for each of those focus areas. In this case, single-use plastics, waste, crime, strategic waste capture, recycling and contamination, food waste, metals, electronic waste, and community composting. So the action plan will carry on from these first 3 columns, and they will have milestones, budget for each one, completion date, what success measures will be, who is the responsible team, and the percentage contribution to our reaching our targets. So we'll have a lot more ability to see when we're keeping up with what we expect to and when we're not. So I apologise if this is still rather a draft document, but it's the strategy that we're taking forward based on the new corporate strategy ideals, and the action plan and the full strategies will come forward in June for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Millen?
Again, it's not me, this is Grace. She's written here that she's had the opportunity to comment directly via the councillor working group. Her main concern is whether the team are being given enough time, resources and breathing room to get the action plan completed in a timely manner alongside the day-to-day demands.
Yeah, I think that was the concern from the corporate leadership team as well, which is why it was decided to proceed with this strategy at this stage. And then because of the work that was required to go into making some of the calculations and working out particularly the financial elements, that time extended through to June, which I think now should be substantial time to pull that into a good shape. So I would agree with her, and yeah, that's why the action plans are coming forward in June.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really glad you raised that, actually, or Grace did, because it does worry me that there is so much here and there is more to come, and it's just pretty big. And it just concerns me a bit, because I can remember what we had first time round when we tried that, and there were sheets of it, there was volumes of it. But I think, I suspect you're saying to us, look, hold on, we're doing it, just give us time to shape it up. Have I got that right?
Um, yes, and I mean, if it would be helpful to have another meeting of the working group again, in order to a sort of a midpoint, we could arrange that, and then that possibly would mean that what was coming forward would ease your concerns, because I think they were raised by the working group, so you could get to have a look again, and then what comes through to the pack then will be hopefully of a shape that would be well received.
Yes, and what we tried to do with this is give it right at the beginning a page on the national context, a page on the local context, and then a short paragraph, hopefully, on each area of focus as to what we've done and what we need to do.
I only wanted to say, actually, thank you very much. I liked that shape. I thought, well, this is good, national, because whoever's reading this, member of the public, they know where we're coming from. It's all very important stuff. And then I kept turning the pages, and I'm thinking, there's an awful lot more yet to come. So I think it is going in the right direction. It's just that I'm thinking of the staff with all that amount of work. Sorry, but that I know how hard you've been working. You know, I beg your pardon, I'm sure the cabinet member works as well, but it's the officers that do the work. Well, it's true, isn't it? It's the officers that do the slugging, and I think, crikey, you do all that work, and then it comes to committee and nobody says anything, and you think, oh, for God's sake, you know, yeah, humour me, because I'm right behind you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I think what's really important to note here is actually the structure of the strategies this time is completely different to what it was previously. So there was a lot of detail previously on sort of long descriptions of things that this time I've really tried to strip back. So in one form, I've taken away a lot of volume, and I appreciate I've added a lot, but it's all detail. And so what we really want to add are layers of detail for that measurability. I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the amount of what's in there in terms of targets for action areas, but this is a shared responsibility. It's not one person delivering on this. And I think it's really important that when we look at what the targets are for these strategies, that we are being ambitious in taking into account the shared responsibility across all teams in delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was noting what you were saying. Thank you very much, Chairman. That helps. Thank you. And I assume that all our previous common threads that we used to have, for example, health and well-being, because for my money that ties in neatly with the biodiversity side of things, because we all benefit from that, not just nature. So there are other threads that we have as well, but there.
Absolutely. There's a lot of overlap. Well, in fact, there'll be overlap in most areas in some form. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Callan.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask, like, how, in terms of the strategies, changed? Because my previous understanding of the strategy was that it was a lot more focused on us as a council, our MBC, our buildings, our services, that sort of thing. And this has a lot more. It doesn't go into too much detail, but it has a lot more areas that are touching on things that, you know, like electric cars must increase from 16.5 to 100%. There's a lot more in here about heat pumps and things that we should be telling the general public to do. And so has it changed from a focus on our estate and us as a council to the whole borough in terms of the two strategies?
Thank you for your question. So it's a balance of both, really. And I think what it attempts to do is really answer
what we have more direct control over and what we have less or indirect control over, which perhaps is hugely, more significant in terms of emissions. So when we look at our carbon footprint as a council across the whole borough, it's relatively small as a percentage, but of course the actions that we can take to reduce our emissions are direct actions, and so in effect sort of easier to make progress on. But I don't think that that means that we should neglect the bigger picture. However, the actions will be approached differently because they are more indirect actions, so it's more to do with influence, it's more to do with partnerships. And so when it gets to the detail of the action plan, I think hopefully that will become a little bit clearer in terms of how we attempt to tackle that. But what it's doing is trying to look at the bigger picture and say this is everything that we need to be considering, and this is how we intend to approach these different elements in different ways.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins-Baldock.
Just to follow on from what Councillor Cannon was just saying, will the strategy outline in relation to individual behaviour, like how you could possibly influence behaviour change? And also, is there a theory of change that's underpinning that strategy as well? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think when it comes to specific behaviour change, we're going to be looking at the action item level. So if we're talking about fly tipping, for example, we're going to be looking at that as a focused action item. And in terms of behaviour more broadly, I think one of the broadest commitments is more to do at a social level, to do with equity and vulnerabilities, particularly around climate change and resilience. But otherwise, it's incorporating it at the action level for each focus area rather than one big specific target, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Cannon?
If I could just, something else that has occurred to me, and also have a question. So the question is more target on page 111. More targeted support for elderly, disabled, minority groups, e.g. for renewable energy, insulation and education. So could I just have a bit more explanation of the thinking around there? And then also, I was wondering about, in the actual strategy document, there's it goes global emissions, then local contexts, and it sort of says what we can do. I mean, shouldn't there be a lot more in our strategy about how we should be lobbying for reservoirs to be built, and we should be looking at how we can cool homes down, that sort of thing, opposed to, because actually you could implement a really, whatever we do, this strategy will not actually, global emissions could still keep going up because this country cannot act. We cannot control the emissions just above our island. So what are we going to do if, I just sort of want to understand, like, in the climate action strategy, what more mitigations we should be doing, really, if that makes sense. Like, we should be probably building another reservoir, that sort of thing, for water.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. Thank you very much. And the examples that you've given are exactly what will sit in the action plan. That's the kind of level of detail that it will get to. So the strategies this time round are high-level strategies. This is the direction and that sort of detail, particularly the climate resilience examples. There is a whole section on climate resilience. So that's where you'll start to see that detail come in, and hopefully that will answer those questions. And certainly the draft that I present to you will not be a finished product. It will be something that is very much open to input on. In terms of the other example that you queried, so that specific one was actually it was Councillor Summerskill when he was introducing the topic or the report, mentioned the key influences that went into these strategies and the development of the key commitment areas. And one of the big ones around that particular topic was the resident survey. So that's where it's come from, the responses from residents on their key action areas where they want to see us take action and what the top barriers were. They were the top barriers, and also confusion, skepticism, barriers to entry on uptakes for things like grants and those particular, heat pumps, solar, that kind of thing. So that's where that came from.
Thank you. So we are asked to page 107 to recommend on. Okay, yeah, we can. Yeah, we can have a vote on the item. Okay, so the proposal is to recommend to Cabinet that they support and approve the updated version of the climate change strategy. Okay, so those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. So that's it. Yeah. Okay, right. So thank you very much, everybody. I can now declare the meeting closed.